Audiobook Academy. Book Summary. Ender's Game. By Orson Scott Card. Ender's Game first released in 1985. As a short tale, it appeared in Analog Science Fiction and Fact magazine in August 1977. Both the Hugo and Nebula Awards for Best New Science Fiction Novel were given to the novel in 1985 and 1986, respectively. Card went on to write a total of 4 more books in the series. Card co-produced a feature picture that was released in 2013. With good reviews from critics and awards like the Nebula, 1985, and Hugo, 1986, for Best New Science Fiction Novel, this book was a success. Card went on to write a total of 4 more books in the series. Card co-produced a feature picture that was released in 2013. A 6-year-old kid named Ender Wiggins is the book's protagonist, who lives on Earth with his older, sadistic brother, Peter. A guy named Colonel Graff visits Ender at home after he gets into a fight at school and reveals that he is in charge of a school called the Battle School. The Buggers are an alien race that the Battle School prepares warriors to fight against. As a result of this, Graff does not allow Ender to opt out of joining the school, and he is taken off planet immediately. Ender spends 3 years in the school before graduating to Command School, where he excels. En route to Command School, Ender plays a virtual reality game in which he must demonstrate his ability to defeat the opposition. It is only after Ender has won the game that he learns it was no game at all and that he has inadvertently destroyed the Buggers' home planet. Genocide is a terrible crime for Ender to have committed. Ender resolves to move to the first colony on the Buggers' former planet when the conflict is over, and the Earth is relieved. On his journey, Ender encounters the pupa of a Bugger Queen who recounts him the story of her world from the point of view of the Bugger Queen's pupa. 2 nameless persons begin the tale by talking about 3 siblings. To preserve the world from buggers, they eventually conclude that the youngest boy is the best candidate. Ender Wiggins, a 6-year-old child, opens the story with the removal of a monitor from his body. With the help of a monitor, officials were able to see things from his perspective. It's clear to the reader through Ender's inner monologue that the monitor has made him an outcast among his peers. Ender believes that his brother Peter despises him because he had a monitor for a year longer than Ender's. There are several reasons why Ender believes Peter despises him, and he hopes he and Peter could get along better. Peter, on the other hand, he believes, is too dangerous and unpredictable to be friends with. The discomfort of removing the monitor is eased by giving Ender painkillers before he is returned to his classroom. As soon as Ender gets back to class, a student called Stilson starts making fun of him for being a third. The government permitted Ender's birth, and as a result, he blames them for his status as a third. For some reason, Ender isn't interested in learning in school and thinks he already knows all the answers. The following day, after school, Ender finds himself once again in the crosshairs of Stilson and his pals. To get out of his situation, he persuades the other lads to let him leave, then kicks Stilson in the chest. Ender believes that by repeatedly kicking Stilson in the face, the other lads will stop taunting him. While waiting for the school bus, Ender weeps because he feels that his sibling has taken over him. This exchange between the 2 mystery voices, who say they approve of Ender's treatment of Stilson but have concerns about Peter, is introduced at the beginning of the 2nd chapter. They liken Ender's activities to those of Mazer Rackham, a character in the novel. As the enigmatic voices reaffirm, they are not there to make Ender happy. His sister, Valentine, comforts Ender when he returns home. The fact that Ender had his monitor for so long before Peter is still making Peter play a game called Bugs and Astronauts to vent his resentment. Peter inflicts bodily harm on Ender during the game and takes it too far. How would it feel to genuinely be a bugger and what do they think of us? Physically, Peter is 4 years older than Ender, which gives him the upper hand. By crushing Ender's lungs with his knee, he claims to be capable of killing him. However, despite Ender's belief that this is possible, he doubts that Peter would truly carry it out. For the sake of his career, Peter is reminded that he can't have anything in the past that looks negative in order to one day become a politician. Peter finally relents after hearing this. Peter, on the other hand, tells Valentine that Ender intends to kill him and make it look like an accident one day. When the children's parents arrive, it's clear that Ender has no kinship with them. He resents the fact that he is a third-tier character. Peter apologizes to Ender later that night as he lies in bed. Tells him he cares about his feelings. Ender begins to sob once more as Peter drifts off to sleep. Chapter 3 opens with a mention of Valentine Wiggin, another Wiggin child. A voice reveals that the voices are scared that Ender's affection for his sister may prevent him from accompanying them there. This dialogue reveals that one of them is shortly going to retrieve Ender and that it is imperative that he succeed. A man knocks on Ender's door the next morning as he eats his breakfast. An officer of the International Fleet can be seen donning his uniform. Because of the man's invitation, Ender thinks he's been picked for something special. Ender is asked about the fight he had with Stilson by the man. To put it another way, Ender confesses that he didn't intend to hurt him, but he also doesn't want to be hurt any longer. He introduces himself as Colonel Graf, the director of the battle school, after hearing this statement from the man. His invitation to Ender's school is extended. This surprises Ender. His monitor has already been confiscated, and he doesn't know how the authorities knew about the fight. This fight was his last chance to prove himself and Graf tells him so. Asked how he did, Graf assures Ender that his reasons for the fight were enough to pass. In a moment of weakness, he says that he was worried Ender would be like his brother. We learn that the penalties for having more than 2 children have been stiffer and stricter in recent years. Graf implies that Ender is essentially IF property because he is a third and his conception was only permitted by IF edict. Graf, on the other hand, insists that Ender must attend the school on his own initiative if he is to succeed academically. They originally intended to kidnap Peter, but feared he was too nasty, Graf informs Ender. Next, they begged for a girl, but Valentine was too soft-spoken for them. This youngster would be 1/3 the size of his 2 older brothers, so parents requested a third. It was only because of the bravery of a commander named Maser Rackham that the entire human race was saved, and Graf informs Ender that they need him to save the world once more on behalf of the entire human race. In the end, Ender agrees to leave and bids farewell to his friends and family. By her side, Valentine begs him to stay safe and return to her one day. Graf is one of the strange voices, and he and the other voice appear together in Chapter 4. They claim that Ender's kindness is a hindrance to their plans to make him a leader. Graf admits that he only enjoys breaking the youngsters when they are put back together stronger than before, and the other speaker remarks that Graf seems to enjoy doing it. On a shuttle to the battle school, Ender is ready to get started. On the shuttle with him, there are a total of 19 other children, all of whom appear to be in excellent spirits. Ender is the only one in the group that has anxiety, further isolating him. Launching into space, the shuttle blasted off from Earth. Things floating around in the shuttle make Ender laugh while they are in low gravity. Asked if they thought it was hilarious, the other children admitted that it wasn't. As for Ender, he says he's by far the most intelligent. The other kids become enraged, and one of them begins to strike Ender in the back of the head with a stick. In order to shove the youngster away, Ender waits until he can seize the boy's hand. However, he hits a wall and breaks both of his arms as a result. Ender is in a bad mood and is afraid he will turn out to be his brother's clone. Ender tells Graf that he feels misled by the man when they arrive at the school. To preserve the planet, Graf tells him that his job is to train soldiers. That everyone is free until they are needed by their race, and then they are merely tools. This is how things will remain for as long as the war continues, he tells Ender. To an unknown teacher, Graf confesses to liking Ender and finding what they're going to do to him horrifying. Ender will become the greatest leader in military history, Anderson assures Graf. At school, Ender and the other launchies he was shipped off with are grouped together. Upon arriving to their quarters, the launchies meet Dap, who explains that he is in charge of advising them and addressing any concerns they may have. In any case, he warns them that school will be difficult and that they would be primarily on their own. In the beginning, Ender is lonely and weeps at night before going to sleep, but he begins to learn quickly and the other pupils begin to worry about his attitude. Bernard, the youngster Ender heard on the shuttle, begins to torment Ender and another boy, Shen, with his group of buddies. Breaking into the computer system and sending a message to everyone in the school making fun of Bernard is how Ender resolves the situation. In response to Dap's question about who sent the message, Bernard tries to answer that it was Ender, but is overruled. This humiliates Bernard in front of his peers, and he suffers as a result. The following year, Ender and Shen form a close friendship. Ender enjoys playing a virtual reality mind game called Free Play in his spare time, which he shares with the other kids. At a level dubbed Giant's Drink, Ender is unable to progress. It is necessary for the player to choose between the non-poisonous drink and a giant's poisonous one throughout the course of the level. At the end of the day, Ender spends his time playing a virtual reality mind game called Free Play. Ender can't seem to get past the giant's drink stage. It is necessary for the player to choose between the non-poisonous drink and a giant's poisonous one throughout the course of the level. Ender, on the other hand, makes the wrong choice every time, and the game is over. Angry with the giant's death, Ender decides to take matters into his own hands. After that, he'll be welcomed to Fairyland in the next stage of the game. Even though he's progressing, Ender isn't thrilled about it. Graf and an IF commander named General Levy have been identified as the two unknown voices. Because no other pupil has ever passed the giant's drink, their officials are overjoyed that Ender did. When Levy expresses concern that the students at the school do not think like other students, Graf responds by pointing out that this is precisely their intention. They are a group of brilliant young people tasked with saving the planet. To go to the door marked the end of the world, Ender has to keep playing the game until he reaches it. Ender is trapped in a tower with no way out when he enters the door. Ender receives a message instructing him to report to his commander. Anderson, the man in charge of Ender's war scenarios, has a disagreement with Graf over Ender's education. As part of Graf's battle room requests, Anderson has a number of scenarios he believes are unbalanced. Anderson is thinking about filing a complaint against Graf. But even if Graf fails, the buggers will triumph, so it doesn't matter what he is doing morally. Ender is a member of the Rat Army Battalion. Dink Meeker, a star student at the school, is designated as a buddy for him. Even though Dink does well in their games, Ender quickly notices a number of flaws in his play and sets out to improve him. In an attempt to stop Ender from using his computer, Rose, the battalion commander, is met with a resounding refusal. This time around, Rose sends Ender in first, hoping he will be murdered and flunk the game instantly, but Ender triumphs and Rose no longer worries him. Ender learns that Dink has twice been offered the position of battalion commander but has refused to accept it because he does not believe in the school's primary objective. This is wrong in his opinion, because he believes that youngsters should be allowed to be kids instead than military leaders. His minor insurrection is Dink refusing to take authority. Aside from the buggers, he believes that the school is being kept open to appear as if the IF is in control. In spite of his skepticism, Ender begins to wonder about the motives of those who surround him. Ender is taunted by a group of older males during a practice session. During the melee, Ender manages to harm 4 of the kids. He regrets harming them, despite the fact that he had no option. In the middle of the night, Ender plays the mind game and heads back to the tower room for a second time. There, he peers into the mirror and sees Peter staring back at him with wide-eyed wonder. Ender is disturbed by this. He comes to grips with the fact that the school is suffocating the part of him that his professors and peers find most endearing in the process. Graf is enraged when he realizes that Ender's game features a picture of Peter. With the help of Major Imbu, the school's computer whiz, he defends his case. That's what Imbu tells him, and that's all that matters in the game. It's safe to assume that the computer decided to display the image because it thought it would be helpful to Ender. When Graf points out that the photo was recently taken, Imbu reminds him that the program can gather information from any source. Graf asks why Ender regards Peter as such a significant figure. Imbu claims that he doesn't know and that the computer doesn't either, it's creating the program as it goes along. Even though Graf is doing the same thing, this information makes him feel better about himself. Ender's family has relocated to Greensboro, a new town on Earth. After the death of Ender, Valentine decided to mark the occasion by celebrating his birthday on her own. As Peter's health deteriorates, Valentine is becoming increasingly concerned. She is aware that he is a depraved person, despite the fact that he appears to be a regular person. Peter claims to have a plan to take over the world, and she believes him. Since the Bugger Wars Treaty has been breached, he has learnt that Russia is preparing for a conflict with other states. Peter informs Valentine that it is in his nature to rule and that he will eventually attain power. Ender is currently a 9th grader at the battle school. He leads the Phoenix Army unit and is the school's most highly ranked soldier. Although he is depressed, nevertheless, Graf returns to Earth in order to speak with Valentine about the importance of her helping Ender. While attempting to get her to write to her brother, he persuades her to write him a letter instead. In order to prove to him that he isn't like Peter, they made her compose it. Angry that they ruined his final moment of happiness, Ender is enraged. In the mental game, Ender goes back and in the snake that he crushed under his boots now morphs into an image of his younger sister. They take a step together into the tower chamber mirror. Ender is content for a while. A largely inexperienced group of students is assigned to serve under Graf's command, including Ender, who is given authority over the Dragon Army as a whole. They're all a lot younger than Ender, in fact. In the beginning, Ender begins training the warriors and pays particular attention to Bean, a swift and intelligent child. Bean has an arrogant air about him. To be promoted to platoon leader, he asks Ender to make him one, but Ender reminds him that he must first prove himself a soldier. Ender begins to focus his attention solely on Bean, isolating him from the rest of the group. He knows that he is doing exactly what Graf had done to him when he first arrived. Ender makes the decision to be a friend to Bean. Ender takes command of his army and conducts training battles with the other best armies in the region. Unprecedented cooperation among his troops has made his army unstoppable in battle. By the end of the first week, Ender had led Dragon Army to victory in 7 straight engagements. Ender begins studying attack films of previous bugger invasions. Ender makes sure Bean understands the importance of the practice battles and is taking them seriously by speaking to him. In his explanation, he explains to Bean that the game is meant to help the school identify the most capable students to fight the invading buggers. For Ender's training, Bean is instructed to select 1 soldier from each platoon of Dragon Army. Ender is tasked with leading an offensive against 2 opposing forces. He doesn't want to get into a fight since he's furious about the assignment. In a magnificent victory, he goes back to his room and refuses to leave until he does so. His battalion has been given to him, and Bean tells him about it later. To tell Ender that Graf has graduated from command school, Graf visits Ender in the hospital. A few days before he begins command school, Ender is brought back to Earth for a brief period of time to familiarize himself with the new environment. Valentine and Peter, on the other hand, have hacked into Earth's computer network to influence public opinion. Both Valentine and Peter are posing as characters named Demosthenes and Locke, respectively, in order to fool the audience into believing they are anti-Russian and anti-war. The IF finds them, but doesn't stop them from doing what they're doing because it's good for the planet. Valentine has had a lot of fun playing Demosthenes and is beginning to believe that she is the real Valentine all along. She's picked up from school one day by Graf, who reveals to her that Ender has arrived on Earth and has come to see her. They spend a long time talking to one another when they meet. After a long day of battling, Ender tells her that he is done and doesn't want to return to school. He understands his foes so well that he can sympathize with them today. When Graf asks Valentine to intercede, Valentine convinces Ender to continue fighting and then leaves him. According to Graf, in order to demonstrate Ender what he is really fighting for, he had to utilize Valentine. He's well aware that Ender will despise him for this, but he has no choice. Even though Ender wonders for a moment if Graf is interested in him, he concludes that Graf is cold and calculated. During his journey from training camp to the command academy, Ender gains a better understanding of the buggers. When he realizes that they can communicate through thought, Graf worries if the buggers even know about sentient life on Earth. He admits that the conflict may have been an error on their part, but since they invaded Earth, we had no choice but to respond. While in command school, Ender plays a virtual game where his skills are put to the test as he assumes command of a massive fleet. Ender is attacked and subdued by Mazer Rackham, who then reveals himself to him. His adversary will be his most effective teacher, he tells him. Ender is reduced to running simulations and directing battalions as his only activities. He sinks deeper into a pit of despair. To see if he can graduate, Rackham tells him that he has one final exam to take. In the beginning, Ender is overjoyed to be nearing the conclusion of high school. However, when he observes the conflict, he quickly falls into a state of despair. Ender is able to rapidly recover and go on to win the battle. Everyone in the crowd erupts into applause when he destroys the planet where the aliens were residing. Graf and Rackham reveal to Ender once the simulation is over that it was all a hoax and that he really did just blow up the planet. Angry and sickened by the thought of wiping off a whole race, Ender is enraged by his exploitation. During his 5-day slumber, a battle with the last of the buggers rages on Earth. As soon as he wakes up, the Locke proposal has been approved. Peter proposed this plan to preserve the planet from destruction. Last chapter of Ender's Game, Ender is looking for ways to help out during peacetime, but he can't figure out a way in. According to Valentine, he will never be able to return home because Peter has control of the Earth. Valentine, too, is going away. She asks Ender if he wants to join her in the first colonization of the bugger planet. To avoid thinking about the fact that he murdered all of the bugs, Ender first refuses. Having reminded him of her love and her belief in his ability to repay the buggers by learning about their world and its history, Valentine successfully persuades him. For a while, Ender and Valentine settle down in a colony on the dreaded planet. As Ender continues his explorations, he begins to see images from the game. The tower room, the dead giant, etc. He goes to the top of the tower and understands that the buggers must have created this in order to leave him a secret message. Ender discovers a pupa bugger queen behind the mirror in the room, and the two communicate telepathically. In order for her to be able to create a new bugger colony, she must first show him the battles from the perspective of the buggers. She explains to him that the buggers had been assaulting since they had no idea that humans were an advanced civilization until they realized this. Ender goes on to publish a book called Speaker for the Dead based on their chat and narrates the story of the bugger. On Earth and on the bugger planet where Ender dwells, a religion is developed based on the book. Peter hears Ender's story from his brother once. Ender publishes a follow-up book with the same title and subject matter. And after that, Ender has gotten Valentine on board with his mission of exploring several worlds in search of a suitable location for the new bugger colony. Andrew, Ender, Wiggins, the lead character of the book. He is a young child who lives in constant fear of his savage elder brother and the bullies at school. At the outset of the novel, as a result of Ender's victory over the school bully, the attention of Colonel Graff from the Battle School is brought to light. However, it is eventually revealed that the Battle School has been keeping tabs on Ender for the better part of his whole existence. As a child, Ender is a genius who can command entire armies before the age of adolescence. As a military strategist and a technologist in training, he's got it all. Ender is an excellent student who picks things up quickly and retains what he learns. While Ender's brilliance and ruthlessness are clearly demonstrated throughout the book, it is also clear that he was picked to join the school and lead the war due to his compassion and goodwill. It's because of his close bond with his older sister Valentine that Ender has developed such strong empathy for others. As Graff knows, it is often the only way to keep Ender working for the welfare of the planet to use Ender's love for Valentine as a weapon against him. Another part of Ender's identity that he battles with is his brother Peter's cruel and violent side. Ender worries that he is growing into his brother whenever his brutal side shows, such as when he is in charge of his army or when he gets into a physical conflict. In the end, Ender accidentally wipes off the bugger race, but he atones for his sins by assisting the race in re-establishing itself on another planet. Peter Wiggin, Ender's older brother. Insidious, savage, and utterly calculating. As a result, the International Fleet declined Peter's application to the Battle School on the grounds that they believed he was too brutal and would fail to win over the respect of his peers. Peter doesn't know why this is happening, but it's clear that he feels belittled because Ender got into the Battle School while he didn't. In the course of the story, Peter matures and mellows, and he and Valentine become closer as they work together at Locke and Demosthenes. Locke, Peter's alter ego, uses his calm and intelligent influence to convey a message of peace and harmony. To gain the respect and admiration of his subordinates, Peter cleverly alters his demeanor. According to Peter's plan for Earth after the Bug War, he is now in charge of all affairs on the planet. Valentine Wiggin, Ender's older sister. Just as clever as her brothers but lacking in any ruthlessness that would allow her to lead an army or be a world leader, this child is both sensitive and gentle. There is only one person in the entire universe that Ender truly loves, and that is Valentine. Throughout their early years, she shields him from the dangers of their brother, Ender. Demosthenes, Valentine's alter ego, is used to influence public opinion in a way that virtually echoes Peter's. However, she seems to have developed a taste for the harsh, warmongering side of her personality. Colonel Graff, the head of the battle school that Ender attends. It was Graff who personally invited Ender to the school, and he is the one who has the most invested in the boy's future. Ender has the impression that Graff has no feelings for anyone, yet it is clear from the moments that he is not present for Graff's apparent passion for Ender. Despite his rough treatment, the youngster is the only one who can save our planet and eliminate the buggers from existence. Because of the lack of care he received from his biological dad, Ender develops a strong bond with Graff. Graff enlists Ender's help in destroying the critters in the end. Ender no longer wants to speak to him after this betrayal, which has severed their bond totally. Graff, on the other hand, may not have wanted to meet Ender again because he received what he wanted from him in the end, an end to the conflict. Bean, Ender's younger brother who attends the battle school. Before becoming an independent army commander, Ender gives Bean the freedom to form his own unit. Bean is yet another brilliant youngster. Just as Graff did to Ender, Ender is separating Bean from the other youngsters in order to improve his leadership skills. Bean is implied to have been Ender's replacement if he were to die at any time. On August 24, 1951, Orson Scott Card was born in Richland, Washington. Card was born in California, the third of 6 children, and later served as an LDS missionary in Brazil. His undergraduate degree was earned at Brigham Young University, where he was also a student at the University of Utah. He started writing during his tenure at Brigham Young University. Many of his plays were performed at the institution, which encouraged him to continue writing. Ender's Game, one of Card's best-known works, was originally written as a short story for the college newspaper when he was working there. He expanded the narrative into a novel, which was published in August 1977 by the journal Analog Science Fiction and Fact. He was also working as an associate editor for the church's official magazine, The Ensign, and writing short audio plays about the history of the LDS Church and their gospel during this time. He quit his job at the magazine to write full-time after signing a novel contract for 2 more novels. For the Alvin Maker trilogy that ran from 1987 to 2003, Card signed a 3-book deal in October 1983. Enormous sequels to Ender's Game were also written, with 11 novels in total, including prequels and short stories. In 2008, the most latest editions were published. For the 2nd year running, Card has been recognized with the Nebula Award and the Hugo Award for his outstanding work, 1985 and 1986, respectively. Card holds the distinction of being the only author to win both the Hugo and the Nebula Awards in the same year twice. Card's Ender's Game movie script was started in 2008 and finished in 2013. In addition to horror novels, film novelizations, and graphic novels, Card has also contributed dialogue to video games and contributed dialogue to video games. A small institution administered by the LDS Faith hired Card as a creative writing professor in 2005. Characters and Viewpoint, 1988, and How to Write Science Fiction and Fantasy, 2001, are 2 of his works on writing, 1990. With his wife Kristen Allen Card, he and his family have amassed 5 children. He and his wife have named each of their children after a favorite author. Greensboro, North Carolina, is where he and his family currently reside. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button for more content like this. See you in next video.